All right, everyone, welcome. Today we're going to jump into one of the most famous and, frankly, coolest thought experiments in all of philosophy. It comes from Thomas Nagel's classic essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And, it gets at a question that sounds so simple on the surface, but turns out to be, well, one of the deepest mysteries there is.
So let's just start with the biggest question of them all, right? What is consciousness? I mean, what is this private inner movie that's playing in your head right now, every single moment of your life? It's the taste of your morning coffee, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of my voice coming through your speakers. How on earth do we even begin to explain what that is?
And what Nagel did, which was so brilliant, was he just cut right through all the complexity. He said, look, forget about intelligence or complex behaviors for a second. The absolute core of consciousness is this. For any conscious thing, there is something that it is like to be that thing. There's a what it's likeness to being you, or me, or, well, anything that's conscious. It's that internal first-person feeling of existence.
So this inner feeling, this what it's likeness, is what Nagel calls the subjective character of experience. And that right there, that's the thing that makes the classic mind-body problem so tough. The question of how our physical brain, this lump of gray matter, can possibly give rise to our rich inner mental world.
Okay, so when science is faced with a huge, complex mystery, it has this go-to tool, this favorite method that has been unbelievably successful at cracking the secrets of the universe. And that tool is called reductionism.
And the idea behind reductionism is actually pretty simple. You just break things down. You take something super complex and you explain it by figuring out what its simplest, most fundamental parts are and how those parts all work together. And honestly, this method has worked wonders. It's been incredibly successful.
I mean, just look at the track record, right? We figured out that water is really just H2O. Lightning, that's just a massive electrical discharge. Genes, the secret of life, turns out it's DNA. We've been able to reduce all these amazing things, but when we try to point that same reductionist toolkit at the mind, we just hit a brick wall. Consciousness reduces to what? What are its fundamental parts?
And this is where Nagel comes in and says, whoa, hold on a second. He argues that when we try to use reductionism on consciousness, we're missing the single most important part of the puzzle. We're completely ignoring that subjective, what-it's-like quality. So, to really drive this point home, he comes up with this perfect, now famous example.
And that, of course, brings us to the absolute heart of the essay, the one question that makes this entire problem crystal clear.
He asks us to just think about this. Not what a bat does, not how its biology works, but what it is actually like for the bat to be a bat, from the inside. So why a bat? Why not a dog or a fish? Well, it's because bats hit this perfect sweet spot. On the one hand, they're mammals, right? So we're pretty confident they're conscious beings, that there's something it's like to be them. But on the other hand, their main way of perceiving the world, echolocation, is just completely and totally alien to us. Look, we can learn all the objective facts about how a bat's sonar works. We can become the world's leading expert. We can know the physics of the sound waves, the anatomy of their ears, the exact neurophysiology of how their brain processes the echoes. We can know everything there is to know about it from the outside.
But here's the absolute kicker. Knowing all of that, all those objective facts, it doesn't get us 1 inch closer to knowing what it actually feels like for the bat to perceive the world that way. What's the subjective experience? Is it like seeing with sound? Is it a super advanced form of hearing? Or is it a totally new kind of sensation that we humans literally don't even have a word for? And this is the absolute core of the problem. I mean, you can try to imagine it, right? You can close your eyes, imagine you have wings, you're flying around, you're making little shrieking sounds, but all you're doing is imagining what it would be like for you, a human, to be a bat. You're just stapling some bat-like features onto your own human consciousness. You are not imagining what it is like for a bat to be a bat. Those are two totally different things. And so the bat example perfectly shows us this huge gap that Nagel is pointing to. This fundamental divide between two totally different ways of knowing the world.
Yeah, on one side, you've got objective reality. This is the world of physics, chemistry, biology, all the stuff science is great at. These are facts that are true from any viewpoint. An intelligent alien could come down to Earth and figure out the physics of sonar, no problem. But then, on the other side, you have subjective reality. And this is totally tied to a specific point of view. The fact of what it feels like to see with sound, that's a fact that's only accessible if you have a bat's kind of consciousness.
And it's really important to get what Nagel means by point of view here. He's not just talking about my private thoughts versus your private thoughts. He means a whole type of consciousness. To know what it's like to be a bat, you would literally need to be a bat. You need its brain, its body, its entire evolutionary history, the whole shebang. It's a point of view that is locked to a certain kind of creature.
So, let's see how this all comes together. Because this distinction we've been talking about, it throws a real wrench in the gears of how science usually operates, how it normally tries to figure things out.
Think about how science usually works. We start with our subjective experience, like, ooh, look, a pretty rainbow. And then, to really understand it, we move away from that personal experience. We study the objective physics of light refracting through water droplets. The whole goal is to get to a truth that has nothing to do with how the rainbow looks to us. We want the view from nowhere.
But with consciousness, you just can't do that. It's the one case where this method totally backfires. You can't remove the bat's subjective point of view to get a more objective picture, because the subjective point of view is the picture. That what it's like feeling, that is the phenomenon we're trying to explain. To remove it is to remove the very thing we're studying.
It's like Nagel says, in this one unique case of consciousness, the more you try to be objective, the further away you get from what you're trying to understand. It's a total reversal of the usual process. To understand the world out there, you take your own viewpoint out of the equation. But to understand the world in here, that viewpoint is the entire equation.
Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? After this whole journey into the mind of a bat, what are we supposed to walk away with?
Now, this is absolutely crucial. Nagel is not saying that the mind is some spooky, non-physical ghost in the machine. He's not trying to prove that physicalism, the idea that everything, including the mind, is ultimately physical, is wrong. His point is much more subtle. He's saying that our current concepts, our current scientific language, are just completely inadequate for the job. We're trying to solve a puzzle with the wrong-shaped pieces.
And when you really think about that, that's a pretty mind-bending conclusion. The bat thought experiment forces us to face a wild possibility that there are real, objective facts about our universe, like the fact of what it's like to be a bat, that we humans might be fundamentally incapable of ever understanding or even putting into words.
And that leaves us with one last, really provocative question to chew on. If we can't even truly grasp the reality of a fellow mammal, a creature like a bat, what else is out there? What other kinds of realities, what other truths about the universe exist completely beyond the limits of human conception? What's it like to be, well, anything else?